Good evening. It's Wednesday night, time for the Buddy Martin Show. Yankee baseball. Yankees are winning Game 3 at Yankee Stadium 4-0. We've got guests tonight for you to talk about. What else? It's Florida Georgia week. Trying to figure out who's got the courage to pick the Florida Gators. So far, nobody I know. Do you? Coming up in just a minute, we'll have Peek Wilbur. We've got a new guest, not new to me, new to you, Ainslie Lee, formerly of our staff some couple of years ago. She now works out in Alabama. Very knowledgeable college football fan. And Kevin Brockway, reporter on the beat, all coming up tonight right here on the Buddy Martin Show. So get your popcorn, gather around, turn the TV on in the background, watch the game, and listen to us. We're going to talk some ball. Do you have the guts to pick the Florida Gators? And what about all those injuries all of a sudden? What is going on? Stand by. The Buddy Martin Show is next.
Buddy Martin, call him up and tell him what you're thinking, but be kind because he's doing the best he can.
Better, stronger, faster.
Mama says that alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth but no toothbrush.
Hey, what if the voice calls while you're gone?
Take a message.
Bye.
You ready, champ?
I'm ready for this my whole life.
I'm incapable of small talk. But that's why you love me, right?
Kind of intimidating to be in the presence of so many great athletes.
Good evening and welcome to the program. I'm Buddy Martin. This is called the Buddy Martin Show. It's Wednesday night. This will be our second show of the week. Glad to be with you, not counting our Tuesday morning show with Shane Matthews. We've got lots to talk about this week. It's Florida, Georgia, and stuff going on. Breaking news, a couple of injuries you're going to be interested in. Florida missing two more key players. Can Billy Napier ever get a break in that regard? And also news about the games. The Florida-Georgia game in the years 26 and 27, breaking today. Well, it's coming out of Jacksonville, at least for a couple of years. What are your thoughts about that? A lot of mixed comments about it. So coming up in a second, we'll have Peek Wilbur. She'll join us. So let's get off our podcast right now. And then, of course, after that, Ainslie Lee, very good young reporter and person that I enjoyed working with for quite some time before she left to go up to Alabama. Then our buddy Kevin Brockway on what's happening on the beat. So Florida Gators will be without starter Eugene Wilson. Breaking news. Can't seem to get a break on this. Probably the best receiver. He's ruled out for the Georgia game with a hip injury today. A story first reported by Gators Online. Uncovered over the course of the season. Been lingering in multiple sources, and he went to see a hip specialist. He is lost for the season. A big blow to the Florida Gators. And get this, starting cornerback Jason Marshall, arguably their best defensive back, out for this season with a shoulder injury. So Marshall is laboring and requires surgery, injured during the homecoming game against Kentucky, did not return. So here's what we got here. We got the starting quarterback, as we know, Graham Mertz gone. We got the starting tailback out. We've got the best defensive back out and probably the best receiver out. So this is not what you need when you're lining up against the number 2 team in the country. You need a little bit of all the help you can get. Bad break for Billy Napier, and we'll see. The question on the floor tonight is, this is before we actually started talking. I want to get your thoughts on this. Before we started talking about the injuries, we didn't know this, is did you have a feeling that something was going to happen? Did you have that kind of thing, and maybe the weirdness of October would prevail again and the Gators would somehow do something different? or something bizarre would happen. Well, if it's happened, it hasn't happened in Florida's favor, at least. So we will see what happens. But right now, it's not going in Florida's favor. And I raised the question: would you have the guts to pick Florida if they were healthy? Look, college football is still a staple of upsets. That's what makes the game still. As we've seen in the SEC in recent weeks, things happen. There's an evenness about the SEC, or has been in recent weeks, where we've seen some of those teams at the top tumble down. We know Alabama's gotten beaten and probably going to miss the playoffs, perhaps, probably. A lot of things are changing. Still much to happen and much to be explained. We've got the situation with teams like Vanderbilt, looked like they're for real. In the meantime, teams like Missouri are not. Georgia, on the other hand, looks like they've had the week off. They're rested. They're big and they're physical. And that's one of the problems that they have, is that they have to play a physical team and come back and then play in that murderous row with those other teams, including Ole Miss, Texas, etc. So, and LSU. So, still trying to find that extra win somewhere. They got a good shot at beating Florida State. Should win that game, but they need to get one of those other games somewhere. Well, with the top teams they got playing against, the top 4 or 5 in the country, it's hard to get that. So I don't know about Billy Napier's future. We've kicked that around a lot lately. I was on the talk show today in Montgomery. We were discussing it. And I said, it doesn't seem like he's going to lose his job, but a lot depends on what happens. If they show up against Georgia and lay an egg and get beaten and get hammered by Texas and then Ole Miss, and they wind up with a losing year, you get to the end of the year, it might happen. There's some people who still want to see a change at the head coaching job. There are other people concerned about what's going to happen to this program if they keep firing the head coach. We know that story quite well. We've been there. We've seen it. So we will have to play that one out and see. I want to get your comments tonight while waiting on Allie to join us. We've got a lot of questions. Your thoughts. Would you have the guts to pick the Florida Gators? Not necessarily now because of what's happened. Certainly the injuries that I just mentioned are a factor now. So anyway, tonight, good evening, Toby Parmenter. Nice to talk to you again. Good to see you. Thanks for your loyalty. Perry Mason's there. Alex Perez. Good old Alex. How you doing, buddy? Let's see. JLB. Good to see you. Daniel Wells. Wally Gator. Nice to see you, Wally. So go ahead and join up and give us your point of view. What do you think? Do the Florida Gators have a chance to beat the Georgia Bulldogs? Well, you've always got a chance, but is it a realistic chance? And the bigger picture is, where's the program going? That's what we all want to know. And can Billy Napier take them there? Billy Graham might be able to if he was alive. So consequently, it's a tough one. I said before the program started, when I was talking about a healthy Florida team, I said, who would have the guts to pick Florida? If Florida had a full team without injuries, would you have the guts to pick them? It's hard. I see nothing but cowards like me. I can't pick them. But I do see a chance to make a statement. We don't believe in moral victories around here. We don't talk about them, but we do want to see progress. And progress is measured in a lot of ways. Like, for instance, how they play against the point spread does matter. And right now, the latest odds are point spread is 16.5 points. Georgia favored. It's gone down from 18.5. The money line is plus 400 minus 550. The over-under is 52.5. So I don't know. Would you take the 16 points? Would you take the 16.5 points? I would have taken Florida at 18.5, I think. I'm not so sure yet about the other. The other part about that is I wrote a column earlier in the week talking about things like revenge and what have you. We'll talk about how that factors in. Let's go to the Orange and Blue Room and see if Allie's through with her podcast. And she's a busy lady. She has a lot going on. other than having two sets of twins, doing a podcast, taking care of Eric, and doing other things, doing things for us. She doesn't do anything. Even to you, Allie, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Just raising the question: have you heard about the injuries?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, I mean, Billy Napier can't catch a break.
Yeah.
You lost your starting quarterback and your starting running back, but we know how that worked out to their advantage because they found the fabulous Frush and got him in there. Now they've lost arguably their best receiver and best DB.
Yeah, it's hard. That's definitely it's hard. I almost am not sure which is harder to replace too, because they both have been really pivotal in the games they've played in so far this season, but definitely big losses for sure.
Yeah. You just got through your podcast. What you talk about, by the way, if you haven't seen it, be sure you check out Allie's podcast. I'm not sure how many times you do it a week, but a lot. And Peek Inside the Florida Gators. Tell them about what you talked about.
Well, on Wednesdays at 8:00 every week, we go live and do a preview of the show. I had Graham Coffey, who is a Georgia beat writer, on. And so we previewed the matchups, and we talked about where he thinks the Napier era is, where it's going, how we match up with Georgia, what scares him about Florida. It's DJ Lagway. So yeah, it was fun. We had some technical difficulties, so it was a little late starting, so it was a little late ending, and just par for the course.
That's how we live. It's how we live on the edge, we're subject to the internet whims and things happen. That's just how it is. So we'll get down to this in a minute, but I think we've been discussing this all season, how to squeeze 6 wins out of here at least. Now, for those people saying, why are we just talking about 6 wins? Don't we have higher standards? Yes, of course. But when you're in this situation, when things are going badly, sucking win, we were wondering if they get 4 wins.
Yeah.
Now 5 looks likely and 6 looks possible.
Yeah.
In my book, that's better. No, I think so.
And I think it's not it's important to remember, this isn't my standards or your standards. This is what we have been told is the floor for him returning, right? So it's not like you and I are sitting here saying listen, we think it's totally acceptable to only win 6 games a year. We just report the news, right? We're here saying we have been told that the powers that be will bring him back for a 4th year if he gets 6 wins. 6 wins is possible. I don't know that I'm ready to say it's likely, but it's possible. I think that 5th win for sure can come from Florida State. I honestly think if you lose to this Florida State team, that it's probably a fireable offense.
It's a death knell.
They're bad, right? They're really bad. But I don't think there's a team on the schedule that there's not a path to victory. It could be very, very narrow, right? It's a very narrow path to beat Texas or to beat Georgia. I think it's a wider path to beat LSU and beat Ole Miss. The possibilities are there.
Yeah, it depends on who they're playing the week before. And certainly there's
every team we play has a bye the week before we play them.
No, that's the bad part about
crazy.
it. Yeah, so I think right now I say they're going to beat Florida State. I'd give them a 35% chance of beating one of the other teams.
Yeah.
That would be probably Ole Miss, although Ole Miss's defense has really stepped up all of a sudden, or LSU.
Yeah.
I think they'll be their better. Well, their home games naturally give them
that helps.
Yeah, so we'll see. But I don't know. It's the poor guy can't catch a break. I'll say that. He just can't catch a break. All right, so Lagway has made it exciting again.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a guy I really love watching. I'm looking over your shoulder at your grandfather's picture there. He would really enjoy Lagway seeing play, and the only thing that concerns me is Georgia is very physical. You could get beat up against a team like Georgia. He's not a kid who's going to back down, but I hope he'll use the ground as his friend.
Yeah.
And not try to run over people, whatever, because those guys from Georgia can beat you up. However, having said that, Georgia's got some flaws. The quarterback position being one of them. What did he throw? 3 picks again last week?
He's had 6 in the last 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah. So that's still doable. Let me ask you about the news about the moving the game.
Mhm.
Didn't come as any surprise. I don't think that they were going to do it
Yeah.
because everybody feel. However, playing it in Atlanta and playing it in Tampa, I'm not sure how I feel about that. How do you feel?
So I would have preferred it be a home and home, right? Only because I feel like, once in a generation, we can experience what it's like to have both of those games on our campuses. I think that would be really neat for the students. The last time it happened, I believe it was 94, 95, when it happened the last time. It just doesn't happen very often. I think 94 of the 102 or whatever have been played in Jacksonville. But I talked to, actually, I haven't even said this publicly. I talked to Urban Meyer and Mark Richt today. And both of them had really different takes on this. Urban thinks it's awesome that it's going to Tampa and Atlanta. He thinks it's great for those cities. He thinks it's going to be really, really fun. Richt would have preferred it on campus, but he talked about, what a disadvantage it is to play in Jacksonville for Georgia anyway. He thinks it should go back and forth between Atlanta and Jacksonville every single year to, so that it's happening in Georgia and then happening in the state of Florida. But I live in Tampa, so that'll be kind of fun to see. I think Georgia will see when it's in Atlanta that, oh wait, it's not any different than it is when it's in Jacksonville for us. It's not, you get 50% of the tickets, you get 50% of the parking. Like it's not, I don't think that it's an advantage. And now that there's no recruiting rules against them being able to recruit at that game, I don't think that there's any disparities there. Georgia can invite whoever they want and Florida can invite whoever they want. And the argument used to be, Florida kids might just be there, right? Because it's an away game. And so then it's some sort of an advantage. But, I would prefer it be home and home, but I can wrap my head around Tampa and Atlanta.
I guess I'm the only person who in the world who thinks it should. I want to stay in Jacksonville, and I think puts the game.
Oh, I'm okay with it staying in Jacksonville forever.
I don't know if this might be not the step to like that. It could be a permanent deal. I'm afraid eventually. And someone went on the record today. I'm not sure, but it was Billy. Somebody saying that it's about money, and they get more money. They get the money, so you get more money. And look, a guy in the high up in the athletic department told me one time, you realize how much money the school makes by playing a bowl game before the season starts where they don't have to give student tickets away?
Mm-hmm.
Go to a neutral site,
yep,
make $1 gazillion that way.
Yeah.
Neutral sites have their advantages in that regard. But, so I don't know. I find myself sound like the old man who wants to keep everything the same, get off my lawn guy when I go through myself. And I understand these things have changed the game.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to leave it the same. That ship has sailed.
Sure.
But where do you draw the line? What is sacred?
Yeah.
What is something that really you don't ever want to see change? We've just about seen everything change, Allie. Almost everything.
Well, let's be clear. I don't want the game out of Jacksonville. I'm simply talking about what they have decided for 2026 and 2027. My hope is that it goes right back to there because I do think it's one of the most unique games in college football. I think there is something magical about a neutral site game. I mean, both those coaches that I talked to today were talking about how, at home and home, right? If it's your home stadium, it's really loud when your team's on defense and you can hear a pin drop when your team's on offense. And that's what they see 11 out of 12 games a year, right? But when you play in this neutral site game, nobody shuts up the entire 60 minutes, right? Because when your team's on defense, they're on offense and vice versa. And it's just loud the entire time. I think looking at it split directly down the center is really, really cool to see. It being right there on the St. John's River, looking at 200,000 fans tailgating on the river, like all of it is so magical. The pageantry of it is what makes college football, the best sport in the entire world. And I hope that never changes.
Georgia fans like it as much or better than Florida fans. They get to come down and party on the islands. And
absolutely.
Spend a week
down on St. Simon's Island and make a vacation out of it.
By the way, have you heard people? This is the third or fourth time I've heard this. Hunter DeVries, I don't know how you pronounce his last name, says that Trey Wilson was mad about not getting targeted in the Samford game, he means, last play of the first half. He says it might have well been a tantrum. His time was done at that point. I've not heard that before except for message boards. Have you?
I have not. And actually, I have, in fact, asked multiple sources about Wilson. And each time I have been assured that, yeah, there is really an injury there, that it's not related to him being unhappy, and hopefully that continues to be the case. But I really do believe he is truly injured.
Labrum? Was that who was that?
I heard he's got a hip issue, right? And that
right. He was. You're correct.
I mean, it could be a hip labrum. I don't know, but Jason Marshall Jr. is the shoulder. But I heard it was a hip issue. I heard he saw a specialist this week. I do think this is a real injury. When things don't go the way that players want, particularly young players, you are sometimes going to see emotion. So I don't think as fans, we should get caught up in, what we view as a temper tantrum on the sideline when these guys just view it as their competitive nature. They want to touch the ball. They believe that if they touch the ball, the team is going to have better outcomes. And in Trey Wilson's case, it's probably always the case.
And
right?
I like that in my players. I want my players to feel that way.
Yes, absolutely.
What's that line? Throw me the damn ball.
Yeah.
Receivers. Yeah.
So I'm not reading into it yet, for sure.
Yeah. In a moment, I'm going to have a special guest on here. I don't know if you've met her before, but she's very, very good. And someone, if you haven't met her before, she worked for us in Gator Bay a couple of years ago. She's gone away now, and she lives in Birmingham. She's an excellent writer, reporter, and someone I got to know when she was still at Florida, Ainslie Lee. She's one of the good ones coming up. Keep your eye on Ainslie Lee. I wish she still worked for us. So she's going to join us on the program in a minute, and she'll bring us a little up-to-date on what's happening in Alabama and Auburn. She covers them, and she also covers a little bit of Florida, too. She has a new job she's involved in. So let me do this commercial. Yeah. I'll go get Ainslie, and we'll have a little gab fest among the boys and girls, okay?
Let's do it.
All right, stand by. I want to tell you about our sponsor, of course, Meldon Law. They've been doing this for a long time. We appreciate very much their sponsorship. They also are in the law business. I'm happy to report I've had a very good result from using them in a business on a matter I had. And if you have an issue you want resolved, don't know where to go to get the right kind of lawyer, you want to call Meldon Law. They'll help you get to the right place. And they, of course, have offices right there in North Central Florida, Ocala, Williston, Gainesville, Lake City. And they make it a point to have as often as possible, as they say, have a Meldon talk to you. They don't want to farm you out to some guy you never heard of. So Meldon Law, they also sponsor a lot of things at the University of Florida. They have terrific giveaways. They just had a giveaway for an all-expenses trip to Jacksonville for the Florida-Georgia game. Tickets and the whole 9 yards. Meldon Law, they like to practice law. They're also great Gators. Meldon Law, they don't back down. Let's go see if we can find somebody that if you saw her work, you'd be really pleased. Ainslie Lee, say hello to somebody's got a great Gator legacy. Allie Peek Wilbur has been doing a podcast a long time. She has, I think, 5 legacies, including her grandfather, father, brother, cousin, everybody, and does a terrific job on her podcast. Say hello to Ainslie, who now I'm not sure what your title is, Ainslie, but you're out of Birmingham now.
Yeah, I mean, it's remote, but so I'm an editor with USA Today Sports, their sports network, but primarily focus on the markets there in Florida still.
Yeah. So she's an Ocala girl, though, just so you know. We're claiming her, and she's done quite well, as I knew she would. One day we'll all be working for Ainslie, that's for sure. So what's happened up there in Auburn and Alabama country these days, Ainslie?
Everybody's looking forward to basketball season. It's been an interesting season, certainly. I think Auburn, I'm not gonna lie, I was on the Auburn beat last year, as you know, and at the start of this year, and I kind of I drank the Kool-Aid. I thought they were gonna be I thought they were going to make some noise, and they've made their noise all right. It's just kind of not the noise that I was expecting them, or I think a lot of people were expecting them to make. So that's been, down in Eastern Alabama, that's been, a not great story. And then you've got, the new era of Alabama football, and that's really not going, I think, as anybody. I can't say people didn't expect it to go that way. I think if you really paid attention, you expected it to go that way. But of course, the fans and the people who watch it in the crimson-colored glasses, I don't think they expected it to go that way. The Vanderbilt stuff was unbelievable. I actually went to the Alabama-South Carolina game, and that was, one bad throw by South Carolina's quarterback from going into overtime, at least, in Bryant Denny. So they haven't been playing their best football, and we'll see what the off week does for them this week. But so like I said, everybody's just kind of looking forward to basketball season here. It's kind of crazy how it's changed, and that Alabama's a basketball state now.
Hugh Freeze remembered they could run the football, didn't he? Finally. Yeah. No, I guess he got a lot of criticism for the way he handled things down there. What's up with the latest thing with him? Is he? He's going to survive, isn't he?
He'll survive, and I think his recruiting is certainly. I always say that's like the best. That's the best tool a coach that's not doing too well can have, is doing well on the recruiting trail, and that's what he's been doing so far. But yeah, I know it's funny. I remember last year he said that he was asked at one of his radio shows, like, who's your coaching influence? And he said Spurrier. And you watch kind of how the offense has looked in terms of him wanting to pass the football a lot. And you're like, yeah, that sounds about right. But yeah, thank goodness he realized that sometimes you can just hand the football off, and that's fine. And so that worked against Kentucky last week. We'll see if he remembers that rolling into this week. I can't remember who they have this week, but yeah, in terms of temperature check, fans obviously aren't pleased with how this season has gone, but they see, them having currently, I think, a top 5 or at least top 10 recruiting class coming in, if everyone sticks. And so that's helping his case plenty.
Well, you grew up a Gator fan. Your family there in Marion County, and you know what it's like to win and lose. I know it's a lot harder up in Alabama. When you lose a game in Alabama, it's almost like a funeral. Talk about the differences, or is there one, between what the people are like, the fans are like, in Alabama versus Florida?
That's a good question. I think a split of having, obviously there's other colleges here in Alabama, but really it is, do you root for Alabama or do you root for Auburn? And, Florida, we've got Florida, you've got Florida State, you've got Miami, of course. Those are your big three, but even, you've got strong contingencies at UCF and USF. And so I think that's different. It's a split. Like, it's not a 3-way split. It's not a 4-way split. There are 2 teams that you're going to root for on Saturdays. And in college football is it. There's not a professional team here like there is at Florida. So they live and die and breathe on Saturdays. And I think I've learned, being in the social media space of both Florida and here in Alabama now, they're about as toxic, right? As I think, any of them. They hang with the best of them in that regard. So it's a little different, but I think really when you're dealing with the SEC, they're all about the same. They're all about the same, and the way they conduct their business as fans and how that goes. But again, I think there only being 2, major flagship universities in the state, and then they're not big professional teams, I think really plays a difference too in a roundabout way.
Well, Allie and I every week are on the show, and we're trying to sort things out, and we're trying to decide if there's a game they can steal down the stretch here, besides Florida State, who they should win to get in 6-6. You're outside the sphere, but you follow Florida, and you're knowledgeable. What's your feeling about Napier, his job security, and whether or not Florida can get to 6 wins?
Yeah, I think Obviously he's coming in, Billy, that is coming into a really, really pivotal stretch for his time at Florida, whether that's an extended period of time or not. It definitely, I feel like the temperature, and again, I'm not as plugged in as I used to be in Gainesville or Florida, but the temperature seems to have shifted a little bit in a more positive direction. If you're Billy Napier, and the seat might have cooled down a little bit, but again, I said recruiting is a big tool if you're a coach that's not succeeding, on Saturdays. And I don't think, it seems like that recruiting class that he had put together isn't really sticking right now. So that's not helping him. So that's trending in a not great direction if you're a coach that, isn't winning ball games. If he can get to 6 wins, I think I said at the beginning of the season, like if he can get to six wins, I think he's safe just with that schedule. Because I think there aren't many teams. There are only a handful of teams in the country that would, get 6-7 wins with the schedule Florida's got. And so I don't know. We'll see. I think just the president situation, the athletic director situation. I mean, I just think there's so many things that need to fall in line for any decision to be made. And so I almost wonder if it is going to kind of be a stalemate situation of neutrality and, nobody's going to make the chess piece that needs to move. And I think it's what that chess piece is subjective. But I think there's a lot of moving parts. I think that was a really long answer. I don't know. That was probably a really long non-answer, but.
All right. I'll let this one go over to Allie, talk about it in terms of whether or not Napier has gotten enough credit for the things he has done right. We've all been critical. Allie, you and I have been critical of him a good deal. But when you think about the fact that in the face of this, I don't know if you call it what you call it, but it's certainly not a great time in Florida football. And all this, he's managed to keep the team together and seeing some progress, Allie. And I think he needs a little credit. He did recruit those guys that teed it up as freshmen last week.
Sure.
And I think he's done a pretty good job so far of holding them together, if in fact he does, Allie.
I think he gets credit for the fact that he absolutely hasn't lost the locker room, and it is very easy if you're 2.5 years in and there's a lot of outside noise and the seat is hot to have players quit on you. You can look at UCF where the seat's not even hot for Malzahn, and they've got guys defecting left and right, like sitting out so that they can save their redshirt year, so that they can hit the portal. And that's not something that a single player, at least publicly, has done at all for Florida. And in fact, I think if you watch from week 1 to where we are now, we actually are seeing players play with a lot more intensity than we were at the beginning of the season. So I do think you get credit for that. And, it's hard. We talk about this all the time, buddy. We like Billy Napier as a person. We think that he's done a lot of good for the University of Florida. I think he's done a lot of good for the guys in that locker room. I think he's done a lot of good for non-revenue sports at UF, things that have happened behind closed doors that people don't even maybe know about. Like he's given them opportunities. But the bottom line is he is going to be measured by his wins and losses. And he doesn't have enough wins. And a lot of those losses are things that I think people believe are somewhat self-inflicted, right? There are so many wins we could have gotten back 2 to 3 last season alone where we wouldn't be having these conversations today if there weren't the mental errors that he promised us in that first press conference weren't going to happen. The reason we think that he is organized and that this largest staff in college football is going to exist is because he told us so. He's detail-oriented because he's told us that. So now we're trying to hold him to the words that he said, and they don't really match up at this point. Can he turn this around? Yes. If they win 6 games, he gets year 4, I think. And they might get there. There's absolutely a path for that. But I think he gets about the amount of credit that he should get.
The word myopic comes to mind because Billy is so enthralled with what's in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
Players and the procedure and the operations and doing everything and doing all things that he doesn't see beyond his notes. And you'll say something to him like, hey, it's raining outside, Billy. Really? You know, I mean, I'm just making that up, but he didn't seem aware sometimes of the nature of the fan, the temperature of the fans,
Mhm.
how they get upset when he doesn't speak to the issues, when he talks around everything in his press conference. He won't directly comment on something. Or worse yet to me is that you can't identify who's responsible on his team for what. I mean, he didn't want you to know who the special teams coach was, or
I
who.
think that's him protecting his staff, but I don't think
No
it.
question about it. There's no question about it. But that can't go on forever.
Yeah, but that's also, if you're working PR for the University of Florida, that might have been Billy Napier's worst problem of all since being at UF. Is there are things that he has said that he could have just changed the wording. The meaning could have been exactly the same, and it would have been received so much better by the fan base. But sometimes that takes somebody who works for the university to do a little better job coaching you on what you need to say when you go out there. I mean, honestly, I think UF fan base is brutally honest, right? We demand a lot, but we will always have your back. And sometimes they just want somebody to stand up there and say, we weren't good enough. We did not do, what we practiced this week. We didn't look good. Our fans deserve more. I'm sorry, we're going back to the drawing board. Just own it. Don't dance around and tell me I saw a lot of good things out of there. The scoreboard might not reflect it, but there was a lot of effort and I think we got better and we had a good time at practice. We just haven't put it together yet, but we're building that foundation, and give the other team credit, because it's not that we played poorly. It's that they're just so good. And it's just beating around the bush. You lost, you weren't good enough. Own it. Let's move on to the next week. And I think fans would accept that a lot more than what we get at press conferences.
We all remember ACU too, and I hate to always go back to Spurrier because it's like, come on, buddy, he's been gone, he's not part of it. But I always loved, he said, we played lousy, we coached lousy. He took blame and gave blame, and he didn't cut anybody slack. He called them out for being lousy, And Billy's like, oh, we can't say anything critical about that person. I mean, we can see it. We saw the game. We saw the number of people on the field. Why is it so difficult to get the correct number of people? Well, 2 weeks ago, we had the feeble excuse of, well, he was one of the guys was hurt, wasn't supposed to go back on it. Well, why not? Why don't you have somebody there looking into that?
You want to know something crazy about that? I talked to somebody from the field a couple of days ago. On that play, the player that was hurt, I believe it was Damian George, but was called off the field by Joe Houston because he was hurt. And Coach Napier sent him back out.
Wow.
And told him, no, you're supposed to be out there, and sent him out. And if you watch the tape, then it takes him 10 seconds to make it to the far side of the field, and then we get the penalty. So not only did we have 12 men on the field, but it was Coach Napier's fault. So when you go in that press conference, own that. That was my bad. I had a miscommunication. Yeah. I take that on me. Don't say an injured player wasn't supposed to be out there. That sounds like it was the injured player's fault. It wasn't. He was off the field. His special teams coach knew what he was doing. The head coach overrode it.
And these are the kind of things, Ainslie, that people get disgusted about. These stupid mistakes that they make not once but twice, and sometimes 3 times. It's hard to understand why it's so hard to count to 11, Ainslie.
Yeah, no, I watched the Tennessee game from about 10 feet from where I'm sitting right now, and probably about put a hole through the window or something. I don't know. It was maddening. But I will say, again, having spent the last year and a half covering Coach Freeze, he's the guy that's too honest, way too honest. And the Auburn fan base is like, you got to stop. You're open your mouth and just put your foot in it type thing. And so, they're like polar opposites. They being Coach Freeze, who I've covered, and watching Billy's press conferences, and so it's been really funny to kind of watch or read the comments on social media in terms of, you've got a guy like Hughes. Some people get mad at him for throwing his quarterback on the bus, and why is it always the player's fault? Your kid threw 4 interceptions. I mean, the coaches aren't out there throwing the football, and so sometimes you just got to be like, dude stunk tonight. And I think that's where you see like very Spurrier-esque out of Hugh versus Billy, who's we've got to go back to and evaluate. That might have been Mullen. I can't remember who the evaluator was, but
It's Napier. He wants to.
Yeah. Always got to evaluate, or I'll talk to you after I watch film. Like, buddy, you don't need to watch film. We all just watched it, and if you're on the sideline, then you saw it too.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, if you're at either extreme, as in terms of being super coy and not taking accountability for stuff, versus, here's exactly what went wrong, here's whose fault it was, people are going to be upset either way. It's all about finding a balance. But it has been humorous for me, kind of being on both sides of Twitter or X and watching kind of the fan bases melt down, press conference after press conference after press conference.
Yeah. Ainslie Lee from USA Today, I want to thank you for being on the program. Come back again. Let's do this some more. And tell us what you're working on next, Ainslie.
I mean, I'm on the back end of things nowadays, so I don't really work on much. I just kind of coach the people who are working on stuff. So for us,
lollygag jobs, easy job.
Yeah.
Slide.
I think I edited like 30 stories today. Today was rough. It was crazy.
That's hard to do.
I mean, I help out with the Gainesville market, and I help out with the Athens market. So it's been a big week, and it'll be a big weekend. And this is probably one of my favorite weeks of the year until it's not anymore, which is typically around Saturday night, Sunday morning. But it'll be a busy weekend.
You take care. Let's do this again, Ainslie. Appreciate it. Ainslie, USA Today. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to talk to Kevin Brockway, but one thing I want to get back to you on is, if you trace the history of this series, and you know it well, I wrote this column that hate, bitterness, revenge have always been motivators in this game. You go back to whatever game you want to go to.
Yeah.
51-0 game or the 75-0 game, which Fans Beard's dad saw. And it was always something about that game. The people don't forget Florida, Georgia. And I'm going to have Kevin Brockway on here in a minute. It seems like nobody is upset about ETN going across to the other side. Yeah, I don't get it. That
was something I talked to both Urban and Mark Rick about today, because I am just so blown away by that. And I understand that we're kind of in this moment in college football where, it's all about the money, right? And so you go, it's a business decision, and rivalries matter less. But I'll tell you somebody that rivalries matter to, and that's Kirby Smart. And that's why I think that he always has his Georgia teams ready to play. And when I talked to Graham Coffey today, he told me a really interesting story. You may know it, but when Florida went to Athens, when Jacksonville Stadium was getting renovated, and Spurrier hung 50,
right.
To hit that 50-point mark, backups were in, and Spurrier, he wanted to set the record, right, for most amount of points scored. But do you know who the backup DB was in that game on that touchdown?
No.
Kirby Smart.
So
I think that, Spurrier talks about how his hatred for Georgia stemmed from his playing days, and I really think Kirby Smart's does too. He was part of that game where Spurrier was enacting that revenge from his playing years, and I think maybe we're experiencing some Kirby's revenge.
Well, Kevin Brockway's got a story on ETN. Let's go get him. But first, let me tell you about our sponsors. We got some fine ones. We mentioned, of course, Meldon Law. TitanMRI.com is one you should know about. If you need an MRI, you're in the North Central Florida area, take this down. Titan MRI will custom make your experience, including giving you a appointment if you need it at nighttime or weekends, if you can't get there during your work week. If you have certain idiosyncrasies about going to get your MRI, they understand how some people are claustrophobic. They have bigger cages you can go into, and when you take an MRI, you know how close it is in there. They're aware of that. And if you have problems with your insurance and you haven't got up to date, but you need an MRI, and when you need an MRI, you need one, they'll take your cash or card, and it's not really that terribly expensive. So I encourage you, if you need an MRI, go to TitanMRI.com and look it up and make an appointment with those folks up there. Let's go see what Kevin Brockway is up to. Let's see here. Where'd you go, Kevin? You're here somewhere, I know. There he is. Good evening, Kevin. How you doing?
Hey, good evening. It's interesting, buddy. You thought that I was hard on Billy a couple of weeks ago when you last had me on. I'm listening to Ainslie and Allie. What do you call it? I'm a pussycat compared to both of them. No, seriously.
Rip
And,
you
and if
apart. Yeah.
Ainsley has to edit my copy too, so I mean that's a very painstaking job for her. I feel bad. I have to put her through all my typos every day. So
If that's the worst she's got, she's in good shape. You're easy to edit. You do a good job, and I know you know Allie.
of course.
We're trying to decide the fate of Napier. I mean, can a guy get much unluckier? Now he loses his best defensive back, on top of that, and his best receiver on top of his starting quarterback and tailback.
I'll tell you what, is Eugene Wilson his best receiver though? I think it's Elijah Badger. I mean, I think that this kid has come in and he's done nothing but make very good catches all year. Now, I mean, there was a lot of talk about Eugene coming in the season, and rightfully so, on what he did last year, and he dazzled in the spring game. But I mean, Shamir DK and Elijah Badger have stepped in, and I mean, they're playmakers, buddy. They're nice players. So while it may seem like a little bit of a loss, I think that some of the skill positions, when you look at how Billy's evaluated the transfer portal, Ricky Pearsall, DK, Badger, some of the running backs, he's done pretty well there. We've discussed that, and I think they'll be able to compensate for Trey Wilson. Okay.
Well, they may, but and Alec, correct me if I'm wrong. When we started the season, now Eugene Wilson was the guy. We didn't know about those other guys yet, and they have come on. You're right, no question about it. But you got the speed and you got the talent, and the guy who was the top receiver when the season started was Eugene Wilson, wasn't it, Allie?
Yeah, it was. He, I think he's an incredible talent. But I kind of agree. Badger lately has really been incredibly impressive, not only on offense but on special teams as well. And I feel like he's a really good blocker, which is something I don't think he gets credit for as well. So I might be willing to come around to that. But I will. I mean, regardless, Florida has a lot of talent at that position.
Yeah,
no question. And I think in fairness, Trey's probably been slow by the knee all year. Starting with that Sanford game, and that's probably hurt him of late, that he never really fully recovered from that. And it probably wasn't even, based on some things I'm hearing, wasn't even probably sure of it when he came back in the Tennessee and the Kentucky game.
Yeah, I agree.
Good story you had today about the ETN story.
Yeah.
We were just saying, I'm surprised a lot more Gator fans aren't upset by the fact that he sort of betrayed them and went over to the dark side. Maybe it's a different time we're in, I'm not sure. But you had a story today about what his value was to the team. Talk about it, Kevin.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I kind of crunched the numbers a little bit, and Florida is running the ball about the same without him than they are with him. So now if ETN goes out and, has 150 all-purpose yards and, really makes a difference in this Georgia game, I think Florida fans will still be upset about the star that got away. But Florida's been able to compensate there too. And maybe that's a credit to Jabbar Jaluke again and Billy and how they identify and develop running backs. Jaden Baugh has been a find, obviously, with that 5-touchdown performance against Kentucky. And Montrell Johnson has been banged up for most of the year. But even a kid, Jacoby Jackson, who they got as a JUCO transfer from Pensacola, is someone that certainly has been a little more than serviceable. He's found the end zone a few times. They've kind of done it a little more by committee this year than they did last year, but I still think that, Trayon Webb obviously has been banged up on and off, but when he's played, he's been effective. And he's back, even though he didn't play against Kentucky. Maybe the bye week he'll play a little more this week. So I think they'll find answers. Montrell obviously is still questionable. They just listed him for the Georgia game, and he sat out against Kentucky, but they found some answers in the run game, and I do think it's kind of a plug-and-play position, And as to your point about the whole rival, I think from a player standpoint, because Jack Pyburn said he's still brothers and so forth, I think we have so much of this travel league going on, the 7-on-7 and stuff, that, so many of these players cross paths even before they get here, that there's a lot more friendships and less rivalries and less between players. There's not the bitterness there was 10, 20, 30 years ago. I just think it's a different age in that regard.
Could be I'm getting too old. The bottom line is that there's talent there. We've seen that. As much as we give credit, Allie, for keeping the team together and having these talented young guys like Jaden Ball, who I've had on my list from day one. I've loved him now ever since I saw him the first time. And the guy, I mean, to be as big as he is, I mean, I had to, I taught when I was on the show last week with Shane Matthews. He didn't know how big Ball was. I said, well, he's like almost 6'3". He's 238, and he's fast and he's got good moves. He's got good hips. And Shane said, well, I was standing next to him on the sideline. He wasn't that big. I don't believe he was. I said, it's on the program. Look at his height and weight. This guy is the real deal. And I'm not saying I was a genius, but I would ask the question, would we have ever seen Jaden Ball, or for that matter, would we have gotten DJ Lagway on the field if it hadn't been for the injuries? Allie?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Going back to the spring game last year, I think Jaden Ball was incredibly impressive, right? He jumped off the page in a game that only featured Gator players.
Yeah.
But Montreal was great last season. Montreal has been good this season. I don't necessarily blame Billy for not immediately wanting to, give more carries to this young guy over a guy that has been successful at that position. I actually like the amount of running backs that have gotten, carries out of that room. That's an area that I don't really have any complaints about how Billy has managed them. I think, Ball has separated himself a little bit. And some of that is just because he took advantage of the moment that he had, right? Because of injuries. But, he's a stud, but I think we were going to have success at the position no matter who was the main guy.
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
The offensive line blocking a little better too. I think that helps in the run game for sure. And let's not forget too, buddy, that ball week 2 against Sanford. Remember he fumbled the ball out of that end zone. I think that might have spooked Billy a little bit. Maybe he wanted to see a little more ball security in practice. But he got another shot against Mississippi State, and he's been pretty shorthanded really ever since that game in terms of taking care of the football. I think that's, obviously the thing with young backs. But Kirby Smart told a story on the SEC teleconference about how Jaden Ball was a safety as the 9th grader, and he could see then like he was this big, strong kid that he was going to really be something. It's amazing. Kirby didn't scoop him up out of Atlanta as well.
Did we hear the story too that actually the final person who convinced Billy to take Ball was his brother, right? His brother.
Oh yeah, that's right. He talked about the high school football coach. He was talking about that as well in the Monday press conference. Which was interesting. But it's like I said, he's been a nice find. Obviously, DJ Lagway is playing well, and you're going with the young kids. You're going to go with 2 true freshmen into this game against Georgia. Maybe they're, who knows if they're going to have nerves, or maybe they won't know any better and go out and make plays and maybe reverse this trend a little bit that's been happening in this rivalry.
Yeah. All right. So let's gather around here and huddle up just between us right here, us good folks, and talk about this. Had they not gotten the injuries, maybe things might have been different. The fact is that this betting line is down to 16. I don't know if it's going to go any further in that. Losing 4 starters doesn't help. But in ESPN, before the last 2 injuries, gave Florida a 20% chance of upsetting Georgia. Mm-hmm. 2 things here. There's winning the battle and losing the war, because you can get physically destroyed by a team like Georgia. If your whole season can be just wiped out.
Yeah.
The second thing is you got a bunch of young kids who don't know any better, go out there and throw the ball around. You never know what might happen. And then this is how upsets are made. Do we see any possibility whatsoever of Florida pulling one off?
I mean, chip in a chair, right? They got a chance.
Yeah.
It's not a big one, but they got a chance.
Yeah.
I just want to see them close the gap a little bit, buddy. It's been 21 and 22. Let's see if they can take a competitive game into the second half, into the fourth quarter. I know that sounds like a moral victory thing, but let's see. This is not the Georgia team of the last 2 years either. They're having some issues too. Carson Beck, obviously. We talked to Mark Weiser for our podcast today. Not the same dynamic at receiver. Brock Bowers, they haven't found a really dynamic tight end to replace him. Oscar Delp's been a disappointment. So, this is a Georgia team. And it struggled against Mississippi State. Obviously, they went on the road and they had an impressive win against Texas. But their defense has been kind of up and down as well. Two of their defensive backs are going to be out the first half due to targeting penalties. So Georgia's got a little bit of vulnerability too. So I just, obviously it's been a good October for Florida in terms of you're seeing signs of growth and progress. Let's see if that progress can translate and them not lose a 3-touchdown game to Georgia again for a third straight year.
I just want to see, did our defense actually turn the corner, or are we just playing better because the competition isn't as stiff as it was in the beginning of the season? And, even if we don't win this game, I still think we could get the answer to that question, right? This is a prolific offense, I bet prone to mistakes, and a really stout defense who has been really tested so far this year. So, if we can hold our own, it is a good sign. And I don't like moral victories either, but if you can hang with them, there's a good chance you can pick up a couple wins later on in the season then.
Yeah. And get out of it without injuries. So you remember last year, Shamar James goes down in that game. The defense goes totally in the tank without him. You can't afford, there's been so many, now you see Jason Marshall Jr. banged up after Kentucky. Obviously, that's a blow because he's one of your better defensive players. But maybe Florida's a little more better equipped to handle it because there's a little more depth on this roster than last year. But we will certainly see how that plays out in the month of November.
Allie and I talked about this earlier about squeezing out that extra win. You kind of given it Florida State as the win. Now that means one of these other 4 teams have got to lose to Florida. Which ones do you favor, or one do you favor, or do you favor any if you had to pick one, Kevin?
I'd say Ole Miss might be the most vulnerable, although, LSU, you might be able to turn Garrett Nussmeier over a little bit also in that game in the Swamp. Mm-hmm. Probably one of those two. I would still lean Ole Miss. I think from a talent perspective, LSU's a little bit more of a talented team. So, that might be, Lane. It's been a little bit disappointing for them. And if they suffer a few more losses, who knows what their mindset's going to be coming on the road in a game like that if they're out of the college football playoff picture. Maybe they'll, let down a little bit. So I would say that's probably your best chance to pick up the 6th win and get to a bowl game is Ole Miss.
It's a very good point. And one I'll end on with this is that this is November. We're right in tomorrow, next day. And this is the time we've all talked about the residual impact of playing in the SEC, that constant pounding, when it takes a toll on you, especially if you're not deep. Now, we could see some teams that emotionally and physically could fall apart in November. Completely, and it goes out of control. We've seen this happen. This is a danger. This is something that could change everything in the second half of the season. It's already been crazy, as we've seen with Vanderbilt. Are you guys expecting a kind of a crazy November?
For sure. Yeah.
It's right.
It's college football. I think the dynamic more with the 12-team playoff, buddy, in terms of the fact that, LSU might come into this game with a lot of pressure, depending on the outcome of the Alabama game. But say if LSU beats Alabama and is back in the mix, do they have the letdown against Florida? Do they play a little tight, knowing that they still need to maybe win out to secure a college football playoff spot? If they lose to Alabama, are they, do they check out? That's the other aspect of it too. But I think this whole 12-team college football playoff puts a new wrinkle into the season in that regard.
Ellie, he's held it together so far. The question is, can Billy hold it together? He keeps getting injuries and they start getting beat badly. The frightening thing is you could lose your whole franchise if you're not careful.
Yeah, each week is going to get harder unless they're a win, right? That's the harder to keep the locker room intact, harder to keep the outside noise out, harder to keep your job. All of those things get more difficult if you stack some losses up here. And so, but he's got a chance to save himself. He gets to 6. I think he gets here 4. So there is a path to that, and we're going to see what they're made of the next few weeks.
I thank you both for your contributions tonight. Allie, tell folks about your podcast and when they can tune it in live, etc., so they'll know you have a growing audience. She's getting to be a very popular podcaster in our community. Allie, tell them about your podcast.
You can follow me on YouTube, A Peek Inside Gator Football. Every Wednesday at 8:00 during the season, we go live with a preview of the upcoming game. And, there's about 4 or 5 videos a week that drop. And so come check it out.
It's good stuff. And Kevin, you got basketball coming up, which is one of your long suits as well. I know you're looking forward to talking about that. And this is going to be an interesting year in basketball for Florida.
Oh, no question. Yeah, Todd Golden has certainly got a squad. Walter Clayton today named to the Naismith list, top 50 college players. Obviously, he leads the way, and it's going to be preseason top, 18 right now, first time since 2019. They're ranked preseason top 25. So I think Todd Golden has the program on a good trajectory, but it's going to be another bear in the SEC, buddy. A lot of quality teams, obviously led by Alabama. And Mark Sears and Nate Oates and what they're doing over there, and then Auburn with Bruce Pearl, and you've got about Florida's picked to finish 6th, and they're 18th in the AP poll, so that tells you the strength of the league compared to just 10 or 20 years ago when the SEC barely got teams in the top 25.
Good stuff. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it. Good night, Allie. Thank you so much once again, and talk to you next week. And enjoy the Florida-Georgia game. Are you staying home or are you going?
I'm staying home. We got lots of kids' sporting events, but I will be watching.
All right. Have a good weekend. Thank you so much. Allie Peek Wilbur. All right, folks, I want to thank you and thank our sponsors. We mentioned a couple already. TitanMRI.com, of course, Bell Law. And what we like to talk about a lot, Renstar Medical Research. They're friends of mine. They do terrific things in the community and community service. They're a great stakeholder in downtown Ocala, and they want to help you have better health. And they encourage you to take part in some of the Renstar clinical trials. How you do that is go onto their website, renstar.net, and see which trials they're running currently. There are many different kinds, and you can take part in those and perhaps find out more about your health. Certainly help them as they're gathering all the data they need for their research, and you can get compensated for time and travel if you're picked for one of the clinical trials. So do it today. Go to renstar.net and find out what people say. Renstar Medical Research, seeking tomorrow's answers for the health questions today. Thanks a lot, folks, for listening and watching. We're back tomorrow night with the Orange Blue Bloods and Ben Troop and the gang. Come join us. Let's talk about what else. Florida's Georgia week. It doesn't get much better. Thank you, folks. Good night.